So I'm driving back from my lunch break, and I figured I'd share some thoughts I have about Warhammer here, and, more of the same from my other ramblings, and I guess we'll call this one the Friday lunchtime ramblings, or something like that. So, been thinking a lot about the new direction that Warhammer's gone in general with lore, and I've kind of coined it as the Marvelization of the IP. It's going more towards being sanitized, sterile, whatever you want to call it, versus what I grew up with, which was the super hardcore, creepy-looking Mike Francina-styled art, the John Blanche-styled art, the dear God, someone started drawing this and never stopped, and it's the most amazing thing ever, 80s heavy metal cover-looking dudes kind of thing. And in some ways, you could argue that Warhammer's starting to lose its identity. It's a very hot take and a very strong take, I know, but I don't know. Thinking back to when I first started playing way back in the day, I first got into Warhammer in general. My stepfather did some electrical wiring for a games workshop in Franklin Mills Mall in Pennsylvania. I went ahead and got a magazine from him, which was an old White Dwarf and also an old catalog, and I thought, that's kind of cool, that looks nifty and neat, and just never got into it after that point. Some friends of mine in high school, when I moved down to Georgia, were very heavily involved in it with the painting, the modeling, and the playing, and, gave my first army. I've told that story before. Y'all know this. But I remember being on MySpace back when that was the new frontier of social networking, and this newfangled thing called Facebook was starting to get started, but I found the Black Templar MySpace page. I saw the art of them carrying the Ark, and all the dudes looking rather angry and cross and perturbed, and said, that's really cool. What is this? And started kind of getting the lore from that point. I think so much of what made that era of Warhammer special to me, too, was the mystery of it. Even going back to the old codices and looking through the old books, they have so many throwaway mentions of things, much like how the Clone Wars in Star Wars was a filler throwaway line that makes you go, huh, what were those? I wonder what that's about. But at the same time, it didn't explain it. You knew the Clone Wars were very important, and that somehow Obi-Wan Kenobi helped Leia Organa's father in that conflict. But you don't know much more about it. The mystery was kind of kept intact. And when it was revealed later, for better or for worse, we knew what the Clone Wars were. But in some ways, again, with the Terminus Decree being a prime example, the mystery was taken and given a very safe, very just ham-fisted solution versus maybe making it more interesting, more exciting. Maybe just leaving it alone and letting it remain a mystery. And in some ways, I feel like, especially with how entertainment's gone with all the Marvel comics, all the Marvel movies, a lot of the writing has gone away from leaving open-ended mystery to explaining everything and tying up every single loose end in a rushed, horrible way, versus we will intentionally leave this loose and open just to have fun with it and touch on it later. I mentioned in my other video about the Grey Knights and the Terminus Decree about Maz Kanata from Star Wars and the whole, that's a story for another time with Anakin's lightsaber. Okay, that is a setup that should have had some kind of resolution, maybe. But if she had made something more along the lines of, oh, I got this from a junk trader here who found it here, I'll tell you more about that later. Okay, well, that's a little bit more of an explanation, and we can kind of sit on that for a bit. But, I don't know. I kind of fear for the hobby going forward from a lore standpoint. I feel like we're starting to lose the point. 40K is supposed to be the grim, dark future of the 41st millennium, now the 42nd millennium. And I feel like anymore it's going to turn into another, we have Gilliman's back, for better or for worse. I think that was kind of a turning point in the hobby by and large, not only from the art standpoint. The art went from gritty sepia tones to suddenly I now have custodians that look like yellow instead of gold and are whatever. The fancy flight, designs and models were cast aside for, oh look, it's the same generic looking Space Marine guy. Personally, I think Primaris aren't the worst thing from the lore. However, their armor to me kind of just doesn't do it for me. It's still Space Marine. It's still recognizable, but I still miss the old Firstborn Marines. I think they look the best. They're iconic. I'm not a beaky purist, but I gotta say, I love the Mark 7 Aquila helms and the Mark 8 armor. I think it looks the best. I don't know. I think in a way, for the next edition of Warhammer, they should go back to more of the basics. Bring the lore back in a little bit. If we want to take it a new direction and advance the plot, fine. I remember back during 5th edition, that was one of the big complaints, even going into 6th, was, good God, we can only be in 999999999 M41 for so long. There's only so many more 9s we can add before it gets ridiculous, right? And I understand that concept and that theory. Age of Sigmar at that point was kind of, I remember that launch being kind of, very dividing amongst the fan base of Age of Sigmar. But I didn't play Age of Sigmar, so I kind of didn't care. But the way I see it in 10th edition, a couple things have to happen. The rules have to be made more player-friendly again and actually make some kind of sense. In other ways, I would not be upset if some of the codexes that came out were strange, like they used to be. I remember the Black Templar Codex, for the longest time, was running a 4th edition rule set in 5th edition. It didn't make sense for 5th edition, but it gave the army a lot of character and a lot of fun. In a lot of ways, the 4th, 5th edition Dark Angels Codex was a test bed for 6th edition rule sets. Again, didn't make sense with the current edition. There were some things that were broken about it, but it gave flavor to the army. In the Space Marines, you're seeing, much like Gabriel Seth would say later on in Devastation of Baal, you're seeing everyone becoming red, blue, and green Ultramarines. Well, it kind of makes sense to an extent because Ultramarines are the largest and most prevalent type of gene seed in the Warhammer, universe. I get that. However, all the magic and all of the lore is turning into, well, here's Ultramarines, but they like fire. Here's Ultramarines, but they like putting cyber dunguses on them and having all kinds of dinguses everywhere. And look at them. They're so crazy, but they're still Ultramarines. I think in some ways we need to kind of lean into the zaniness of each army. I have not looked into the Space Wolf recently, but I've got a fear that they're going to become more sanitized. Just my thought process. So hopefully, in the future, the hobby will kind of get back to more of the fun route and kind of get rid of this mass commercialization it's going through right now. Star Wars did it, and we're seeing the effects of that right now with the movies becoming just all kinds of nonsense and weird, and they're playing into the rabid fan base that will just eat the IP up because it's the IP and not actually enjoy what it's putting out. I think in some ways, too, the Warhammer lore and the Warhammer games need to focus on becoming a good game and a good story, more so than being just a good Warhammer story or a good Warhammer game. That's my opinion. It's whatever. So, that's kind of what I got for right now and some thoughts I've been having. Hopefully, if Henry Cavill's Amazon show ever takes off, it'll be a smash hit and will be a good storytelling in the 41st millennium. Dawn of War 4's trailer kind of gives me some kind of hope. I'm also glad that the Iron Harvest guys are behind it. That was a pretty rock-solid RTS. I played for a little bit. Don't regret buying it. Just kind of fizzled out and playing it, but it was a pretty good game, and it's in good hands with those guys. But, I don't know. Hopefully in the future we'll get back to more of the crazy, zany Warhammer we knew that's still grounded and serious, but is just off the wall with tech and whatever. And maybe the story will progress in a more meaningful direction than currently. Who knows? But I kind of feel like we're on the precipice of the hobby starting to flounder more than it is currently, between the price points and the whole issue about stores not getting their stock and, hey, we're going to get this cool model but lock it behind a box you have to buy for $400 versus buying the $35 model. There's a reason why third-party proxies are becoming so popular, and it's not just because you can buy them on Etsy for cheap. A lot of it's because, hey, I want this model, they no longer make it, and if they do, I have to either order it for $70 on Games Workshop, or I can go buy the $400 Combat Patrol that has one in there, and then do whatever with the rest of it. It's making kit bashing a lot more difficult and taking that part away from the hobby, so maybe one day it'll be a little more back to where it was, or maybe it'll just be more friendly. Who knows? But in all things, keep painting, keep having fun, keep enjoying the lore. The fan base will make or break the hobby, even if the company itself no longer supports it. So, hopefully you all have a great day. To those who like and subscribe, thank you so much. And that's all I have for now.